Hello, this is the Jay Show, and this is Dr. Jay Smith in London with Hatun Tash.
Hello, Jay. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, we've been going through, this is our 6th episode, looking at the historical antecedents. What is exactly happening with, of course, at the beginning of Islam. We can see here the first Qiblas were mostly facing Petra up until 706. All of them were facing Petra until 706. Here we're then, from 706, suddenly we get some mosques that start to face this central place, very specific, 0.92, less than 1 degree. They're all facing this specific place.
Yeah.
Then we get these parallel mosques over in North Africa and Spain that are facing parallel to a line that goes between Petra and Mecca. And then finally in 727, they begin to face Mecca.
Yeah.
So this is not
yet,
these are very specific.
Yet we've got some of the earliest mosques are facing to Mecca as well. But from 876, we've got mosques start facing
all the mosques then.
Yeah.
And the other 3 are cancelled out. So no more Petrin, no more between, no more parallel. All the mosques from 876 and up till today are now all facing Mecca. But they're very inaccurate. They get more inaccurate. 4.78% inaccuracy. I mean, that's degrees off as an average. Now, what's going on? It sounds like there's something going on politically speaking.
Yeah. So, according to Islamic tradition, we know from 570 to 632 Muhammad based in Mecca and Medina. But when we see, that's according to Islamic tradition, when we see until 706 mosques are 726 mosques are facing towards Petra, then we ask the simple question: what was happening in Petra? Why Petra?
Well, I have and Dan Gibson really helps us out with this. And to understand what's going on, we need to back up. We need to back up to Abu Bakr, Umar, and especially after the 4 rightly guided caliphs.
Yeah.
If they are accurate, we don't know because we don't have any other reference to these 4 rightly guided caliphs until we look at the traditions that begin to appear in the 9th century and 10th century.
Yeah.
But when you look, and what Dan Gibson says, to understand what's going on, you need to start with the Umayyad dynasty. The Umayyads started with Muawiyah, who comes to power in 661. So this is roughly 30 years after Muhammad's death. Muawiyah comes to power, and the first thing he does is he sets up his headquarters, political headquarters, up in Damascus, way up north.
Yes.
Now, that's way far north. That's nowhere near Mecca or Medina. That's even further than Jerusalem. That's much further at Petra.
Suddenly something is happening. Headquarters is changing. If it was ever Mecca or Medina, it's somewhere in north.
Or was it always there?
Those are good questions.
See, this is what Tabari and them say. But I would suggest, why would it ever be? If there's no Mecca anyways, there could be no headquarters down in Mecca. There was no sanctuary. What we do know is that the sanctuary is not Mecca, it's Petra.
Yeah.
So here he sets up his headquarters way up in Damascus. Now, as we're going through this, I'm just going to put a map up so you can see what we're talking about. Let's put this map up here again. Can you see where Damascus is? It's right above Hama there. It's right coming down. Can you see? It's up above Israel. And then you can see where Petra is, and then look and see where Mecca is. Mecca is even before. Let's put this map up. Maybe this one here is a better one, because there you can see Damascus, there you can see Petra, and there you can see Mecca. Now look at where Damascus is. That's the political headquarters. Yeah. Petra is the sanctuary.
Yeah.
It's the Nabatean sanctuary. We're going to get to that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But what we do know is that's always been the sanctuary. So the political power are in Damascus, but they are facing their Qiblas. All their Qiblas are towards Petra, not Mecca. Now, 680s come about. By this time, the Sufyanis have now acquiesced, and the Marwanids come to power. The Marwanids are a much stronger family within the Umayyad dynasty.
Yes.
In 680, Marwan I comes to power. And Marwan I is very strong. His son is Abd al Malick. Abd al Malick is even stronger. 685, they are in Damascus. All their mosques are facing Petra. Every mosque up till this time is facing Petra. There is a man named Zubair who is in Petra.
Yeah.
He is in charge of Petra. He is the governor of Petra.
Yeah.
He rebels against this Umayyad power.
Yeah.
He doesn't like them. This is a political rebellion.
Yes.
So what does he do?
He declared himself as a caliph.
He takes on. He says,
Yeah.
I'm the caliph here. I'm in the holy city.
Yeah. And then he got a group to fight against other part.
And who is the one that is given responsibility to confront him? Well, the man is Al-Hajjaj.
Yes.
Al-Hajjaj is given the responsibility by Abd al Malick, because now Abd al Malick's in power. This is now 685, 684, 685. Abd al Malick comes to power. Al-Hajjaj is his governor. And he then has to shut down this rebellion.
Yeah.
And so he's shutting down this rebellion in 680s, 690s. And in shutting down the rebellion, Zubair and him then destroy Petra. And Hajjaj is the one that actually helps destroy Petra.
Yes.
He actually is the one with these trebuchets. You know what a trebuchet is? It's like a sling. It's like a machine that slings huge rocks.
Yeah.
Big rocks. And
Yes.
it's from ancient time. The Greeks used it, the Romans used it, and they would fling huge stones, especially if you're above looking down in a valley like they would in Petra. They would these huge stones down, and they would destroy all the structures down below. And they destroyed Petra. Zubair then flees Petra because of destruction.
You mean they destroyed the Kaaba?
They destroyed the Kaaba,
yeah.
And they destroyed lots of the, if you look at Petra, it has all these beautiful stone buildings that are carved out of the cliffs.
Yeah. So because we've got, like, tradition tells us there was a war and then he was throwing those stones from that war. If it was thrown to the Kaaba in Mecca, we should have some evidence for that.
Where are these stones in Mecca? None of these stones exist.
Yes, we don't have them. They
Where
are in
do you
Petra.
find these stones? They're all over Petra.
Yeah, they are all over
You can see these huge stones that were used in the trebuchet. In fact, pieces of the trebuchet are still existing there.
Yes.
You can find bits and pieces of the trebuchets.
As a historical reference.
That's proving that this did happen. So Zubair takes the black stone, this probably was a meteorite, and he flees with it out of Petra and goes south.
Probably Saudi Arabia.
We don't know where he goes south. That's not told because his story is not important. He's not part of the big ones. So what happens next? Well, Al-Hajjaj is infuriated with the Umayyads.
Yeah.
Because they then are up in Damascus and they don't care too much about Petra that has been destroyed. So what does he do? He then starts his mosque in 706 in Wasit. In Wasit is the first mosque that he builds, which is in Iraq.
Yeah.
That mosque is the first one in 706 that's facing another direction. Basically what he's snubbing his nose at both Umayyads, and he's snubbing his nose at Zubair. And he was, what we know about Al-Hajjaj, he was very irascible, he had a temper, he was pretty much his own boss, he didn't like to be under authority of anybody. This is what we're getting from the traditions tell us about. So you can see that he was a man that did not like anybody, and he was saying, well, I'm going to make my own. I'm gonna. Petra has been destroyed. The Kaaba has been destroyed, which he destroyed.
Yeah.
He was in charge of it. He no longer wanted to pray there, so he decided to have his own mosques, Qiblas, that are facing a place in between. We need to still find out what that place is, and that's where Dan Gibson is going to be looking next to try to delineate why is it so specific. 0.98 degrees. That means within 1 degree, they're all facing. 8 mosques are all facing.
There is something in that location which made people to believe that was the direction of the prayer.
It's somewhere near Khaybar, just north of Khaybar.
Yeah.
We need to find out. I would suggest that maybe we'll find out more about Al-Hajjaj. We'll find out more about why. Now, meanwhile, you can see that there's a lot of mosques over in North Africa and in Spain that are upset with both the Umayyads because they're having problems with the Umayyads, and they're creating mosques that are facing not Petra either, but they're not still facing Mecca.
But something to parallel.
They're facing parallel, which is like a way of snubbing their way also against the Umayyads.
Yeah. So something is happening behind the screens as people who declare themselves caliph or leader to be to lead that place, and people, as there is a disagreement from that disagreement, people are making a decision. That is not the direction of my prayer. That is not my Kaaba. That is not my Qibla.
Now, let's go back and let's pick up the story then with Petra. Why Petra is so important. Let's put the slides up and let's look at Petra. Remember we said at the very beginning that when you look at the Quran, you will find that almost all the references that we see in the Quran, in the traditions, fit Petra. Don't fit Mecca. But take a look at what they do fit. Everything that we've looked at, the fact that it's this place where this prophet lived is in a valley. Petra is in a valley. You can see the map there of Petra.
Yeah.
That it has a parallel valley. You can see the parallel valley on the map there. Look and see that line, that dark line going across. That's the stream that goes right across the valley. Petra has a stream. Petra has field, trees, grass, clay, loam. It has olive trees. That's what we're looking for.
So whatever we are looking for, the description given for Mecca in Islamic traditions.
Everything that we're looking for in this book fits Petra.
In this book and also from the traditions.
And the tradition, they all fit
the Petra. Yeah.
So it looks like it's Petra that they're referring to. Take a look at where Ad, Thamud, and Midian. Remember we talked about Ad, Thamud, and Midian. Ad 23 times, Thamud 24 times, Midian 7 times. They must be important. We know why, because they all fit Petra. Yeah. This is where this holy city is, and that's why we now know that Petra was chosen.
Yeah.
Now,
also, as we read the Quran, there are ayats which is mentioned as the satanic verses, which contains a couple of name of gods.
Surah 53, ayah 19 and 20, names Abd al Malick and Al Uzza.
Yes, and we see those gods are the gods where exist in Petra.
Including Alat.
Yeah.
And Al Uzza is the same name for Alat. Alat is the feminine form of Allah.
Yeah.
Allah is a Nabatean god. Allah is the Nabatean gods, which Petra was their center. Petra was their headquarters.
Yeah.
Petra was their holy place, and has been their holy place from the 2nd century BC right up until the 7th century, including up until the 8th century
and there is
AD.
no any physical evidence those gods kind of worshipped among the Arabian Peninsula.
No, not at all. Not in the first time. They were all worshipped way up at the north.
Yeah.
So 2 of those goddesses, females, are the wives of Allah.
Yeah.
Allah is one, but he has a wife. We've talked about this in another episode. So let's look at the significance now. First of all, one thing you notice, nothing is known of Muhammad until the late 7th century. His biography and sayings don't appear until the 9th century. His city, Mecca, isn't referred to until the 8th century. Thus, much of what we know of Muhammad is written down hundreds of years later and hundreds of miles away. It looks like he is nothing more than a later redaction begun by Abd al Malick. Now can you see why Abd al Malick comes into the picture?
Yeah.
Abd al Malick is important. Now, when we go back, let's go see why. If we let's take a look and see what we know, what really happened. And this is a possible scenario. I'm going to put what we now find with Dan Gibson's material. Let's put it all in.
So we are putting everything together to see what are the possible actions
now,
happening.
Hatun, this is a what if scenario, okay?
Yeah.
For those of you who are watching, this is a what if. By next year, we will have more material. We'll be able to even get more specific of what we're saying. So this is what we now know on July 26, 2017, here in London. Okay, are you following that? This is all we know at this time. This is the what if. Now let's take a look at. For 40 years, these Arabs who are descendants of the Nabateans, who are headquartered up in Damascus, have now been in power.
Yeah.
Abd al Malick is known as one of the greatest, in fact, of the Umayyad dynasty. He is known as the greatest, the strongest of the Umayyad caliphs. He comes to power in 685 and is in power to 705. Now, they controlled the world since 642. So for 40 years they've been in control, but where have they got their identity from? They don't have much of an identity as Arabs, do they?
Yeah.
All their identity comes through the prophetic line of Abraham and Isaac. Take a look at the Quran. 25 prophets, 19 of them are from the line of Isaac.
Yeah.
4 of them, we don't know who they come from. Only 2 of them are in the line of Ishmael, which is the Arab lineage, and that would be Ishmael himself and Muhammad. Of course, that's assuming we know who Muhammad is. Abd al Malick, we don't know who Muhammad is yet, because remember, it's Abd al Malick, 685. Yeah. So what are you going to do, Hatun, if you're a caliph, you're now in power, you're the greatest power of your day, your biggest enemies are no longer the Sassanids over in the east, because they've been pretty much destroyed.
Yeah.
Your only real enemies are the Byzantines up in the north.
Yeah.
In the north in the Northwest. How are you going to, what do you do to create an identity for yourself?
So you need to have a book, and you need to have a man.
A book and a man.
Yeah.
You need to have your own book, and you have to have your own man.
You need to separate yourself from the other faiths or other religions. For that, you need to have a book, and you need to have a man.
So let's look at the coins to see what Abd al Malick does. Now these coins are in the British Museum, and you can see that up until the time of Abd al Malick, the coins were like the Byzantine dinar. So there you can see the Byzantine dinar. The Sufyani dirham, which are just below it, can you notice that they actually use the same images?
Yeah.
There's the now the caliph with two of his retainers on either side, and instead of the Byzantine cross like the Byzantines have, they now have the Arab cross. They've taken the cross piece off, and which is interesting because Muslims can't have images, can they?
They shouldn't be having.
That's against Islam.
Yeah.
So you can see this was not a problem early. Certainly the Arab the dynasty up until Abd al Malick. In Abd al Malick's time in 685, he coins that top right-hand coin where you can see him with his sword. So he's an image of himself. But then he eradicates that coin, and in 692 he introduces the coins that are on the bottom right-hand side.
Yeah.
Takes off the images and introduces Arabic script. Take a look at what's on that script. Maybe you can't see it, but do you notice that's the Shahada?
There is one God. There is no God.
There's only one God but God, and Muhammad,
his messenger.
Muhammad is introduced on the coins.
Yeah.
So this is the
time.
first time. No, this is not the first time we've seen this. Actually, the first time we see it is on the Dome of the Rock.
Yeah.
The Dome of the Rock. Now take a look where it is.
It's almost the same year, though.
691, 692, 1 year apart.
Yeah.
In 691, take a look at this image there, and what do you notice about the Dome of the Rock? It sits behind Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's built in 691. The Al-Aqsa Mosque, as we saw earlier, is built in 709. But take a look at the right-hand image, and you will see that the Church of the Sepulchre, which is the seat of Byzantine well, this is the empire, but this is their theological headquarters. Yeah. This is their sanctuary. It is down in Lower Inner Valley. He builds the Dome of the Rock above it, on the hill above it, looking down onto it. A one-upmanship, and he builds the largest structure of its day in 691 on the dome, on that hill that overlooks the sepulchre. Basically saying, I'm bigger than you. We're the new man in the block. This is my way of saying, woo, look at who I am. I am now an Arab. But take a look what he does.
That's why soon after they put the Dome of the Rock, all the information's on the Dome of the Rock just to attack the other faiths.
Now to do that, you need to do that. What you want to do is, first of all, you use Byzantine architecture itself. Yeah. You produce a much larger and more prominent building in the holy city of the Jews and Christians, not up in Damascus or way down Mecca, because Mecca haven't even discovered yet. Therefore, you need to know why this building was built. To do that, you need to go to the only part of the building that still exists today that's original, and that's the two inner ambulatories. The building's been destroyed and rebuilt 11 times. So go to the inner ambulatories, as we're going to see on the slide there, and read what's in the Arabic. That's the only original part of those ambulatories. Hatun, what do we find? Take a look at what we find.
We find the informations which against the Christian faith, very polemical statements. So we see God doesn't have a son. Do not say three.
So that's against the Trinity.
Yeah.
God, say one, there's the Tawheed, but it doesn't use the word Tawheed, and God has no son. That's against the Trinity and the sonship of Jesus Christ. Let's look at the next slide. Abd al Malick introduces his Arab identity. He begins with the Dome of the Rock in 691. It's larger than any other non-Arab structure. It's facing the Arab sanctuary Petra. It incorporates inscriptions against Byzantine Christianity. It introduces the faith Islam. That's where Islam is introduced. It introduces the people Muslim. That's also introduced on other inscriptions there. And it introduces the name Muhammad, their prophet. At the same time that he's doing that, we have the Caliphal protocols. Yehuda Nevo is the one that's looked at these protocols in Jerusalem. And he's noticed that all the protocols from the Sufyani period, from 661 up until the Marwanid period in 680, when Marwan the first comes into power, there's no Bismillah, there's no reference to Muslims, there's no reference to a religion called Islam, and there's no reference to Muhammad, nor is there any reference to any Quran.
And we see all those things from 690s.
But these are the protocols. These are the official documents of the caliphs. When Abd al Malick comes to power, these caliphal protocols continue. And then Yehuda Nevo notices that in 691, suddenly overnight in 691, there is only one God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet. The same time the Dome of the Rock is built, you have then these protocols introducing the Shahada, with God as one and Muhammad as his prophet. So that happens in 691. Then the coins in 692, the next year, they introduce it on the coins. Take off the images and introduce the coins.
Yep.
Replace the image with Arabic script using the Shahada. So here's the possible scenario. Once he introduces Muhammad, he then needs a revelation. Can you understand? Once you have the prophet, every prophet has to have a book. So the earliest Quranic texts on the Dome of the Rock, which are introduced in 691, they then start to introduce on the manuscripts. We do know that the palimpsest of the Sana manuscript, the lower text, is around the time of Abd al Malick. That has a different text than the one that's 705, that's introduced at the time of Al-Walid. Al-Walid comes to power in 705. He's the son of Abd al Malick, and he's the one where most of these manuscripts start to come into appear. And they then are starting, and from the 690s up until the 750s, none of them are complete to these manuscripts. They are not parallel with the Quran that we have today. They continue to be changed and corrected by later caliphs up into the 9th century. We saw that in the manuscript that we looked at. The sanctuary is still down in Petra, but that is destroyed in 713.
Yeah.
During the time of Al-Walid, an earthquake comes and destroys completely Petra.
Yeah.
Well, once it's destroyed, then you no longer is God's presence there.
That might be one of the reasons why it's called place of crying.
That's probably why it's called the place of crying. So a new place is needed. You can see a new sanctuary is needed. Yeah, so meanwhile, Zubair has zipped on down south. Abd al-Zubair then allies himself with the Abbasids, who are way up in Ctesiphon, which is today Baghdad. They're up in Iraq.
Yeah.
So you have two powers now starting to, the Abbasid power is now starting to form over here in Iraq. Here is Damascus up here in Syria. This is in Iraq. They're starting to form. Zubair is down here in possibly Mecca, and he's now allying himself with the Abbasids. Can you then understand why by 727 then, you then introduce a Meccan Qibla? 727, along with the Abbasids. Now you're introducing a Meccan Qibla.
Because now you've got the man. Sorry, you've got the man, you've got the little bit script, and then you need a place of pilgrimage.
Now the Muslims have a prophet, a revelation, a sanctuary. They need a history, and that's why the histories for all this don't even get introduced until the 9th century, with the Sirah in 833, and then the Hadith in 870, and then the Tafsir in 923. By the 9th century then, they have the book, the man, the place, and the story. A new religion is formed, yet not within 22 years like Muslims like to tell us, from 610 to 632. No. It looks like it happens over 100 to 150 years. It is a political entity. It is a need for an Arab identity. Can you then understand how the archaeology fits the manuscript evidence? The manuscript evidence fits the topographical evidence. When we look and see and look at all the Qiblas we've looked at through these different episodes, up until 706 are facing Petra. Then they start to face in a median direction by 706 with the Wasit Mosque built by Al-Hajjaj.
But still we've got mosques facing towards Petra until 743.
So why are these mosques still facing Petra? Well, those are the mosques that were allied with the Umayyads. Whereas all the mosques that start to face Mecca then are allied with the Abbasids. The Abbasids are the new men on the block. They're way up here in Baghdad, whereas you have the Umayyads over here in Damascus. So you're having this war between these two political powers. Whatever mosque is built, depending on where their alliance is, they will focus their Qibla towards that. Towards that holy city. For the Umayyads, the holy city was Petra. For the Abbasids, the holy city became Mecca, along with Zubair. And Al-Hajjaj is in between. The reason why he's in between, because he's angry at both factions. He's headstrong. Only 8 mosques that we've been able to find from him. Meanwhile, way over there in North Africa and in Spain, they are going parallel because they don't want to go with either one of these two powers. They have their own direction, and they are just going straight south. Now, can you see all this shows that this is not a religion that was created by one man named Muhammad in 22 years. It looks like a religion that started coalescing around political need. The political need was to create an Arab identity. Abd al Malick does that. He does it with the coins. He does it with the Dome of the Rock. He does it with the Caliphal protocols. Then, of course, his son is the one that starts to create the book. You need the book. Once the book starts to get put together, it starts to have 4 different cities. We have one book, one codex that you know, Ubay ibn Ka'b, became popular in Damascus. Another codex in Baghdad became popular from Ibn Masud. Another one in Ibn Musa became popular in Basra, in southern Iraq. And then Zayd ibn Thabit became popular in Medina. It's 4 different codices,
Yeah.
4 different cities. They call them metropolitan codices. By that time, they start to proliferate, and that's why we start to see so many manuscripts
Yeah.
start to appear. We talked about these, the 6
Yeah.
major manuscripts.
And also helpful to remember, we are dealing with the historical and archaeological evidence. Bible has been criticized by historians and by archaeologists for centuries. And sadly, we start just asking very basic questions about the history of Islam since last couple of decades.
Yeah.
And this book regarding the Qibla just come out now. In the future,
This book you have right there.
Yeah.
It's just been out 2 months.
yeah, it's been out 2 months, but the informations regarding this book have been published last year. So in the future, we will have more details. We will know more, but we are just saying those are the things our dear Muslim friends need to consider, actually how Islam is started, where it started, and what it has to do with man called Muhammad.
No. What about Muhammad? Let's put the slide back up and we're going to end with this. Since much of what we now know about early Islam is in doubt, since much of the Quran is also in doubt, since nothing is known of Muhammad until the late 7th century, or Mecca until the 8th century, or his story until the 9th century, hundreds of years later and hundreds of miles away, can we therefore conclude that Islam is nothing more than a later redaction possibly begun by Abd al Malick and carried on by others, then continued by his descendants, proving Muhammad had nothing to do with the Quran? So who is he? And what is this person? We've got the wrong man at the wrong place doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. But let's
Yeah.
look at Jesus now. Look at the next slide. What about Jesus? We know where Jesus was born in
Yeah.
Bethlehem. We know where Jesus grew up in Nazareth.
Yeah.
We know where
When he
Jesus
died.
died and
Yeah.
when in Jerusalem. We know what Jesus did in the last 3 years specifically. We know from eyewitness accounts, Matthew and John. We know from hostile accounts, Thallus, Tacitus, Josephus. We know when they were written, between 15 to 60 years later. Few doubt his historicity. Thus we have the right man in the right place, doing the right thing at the right time.
Yeah.
Hatun.
That's called Lord Jesus.
Thank God for Jesus.
Yeah.
And thank God I don't follow Muhammad. Historically, we have looked at both Muhammad, and we already know about Jesus that we cannot find anything wrong with his historical claims. We know we've got the right man at the right place, doing the right thing at the right time.
Yeah.
In almost every category, we've got the wrong Muhammad. He's not even the right city. He should be up 600 miles further north. It could be Muhammad's not even his name. We don't even now know whether Muhammad is the right man. Who is this prophet? What we do know is the Quran had nothing to do with him. It looks like early Islam had nothing to do with him.
Even the mosques
have nothing to do with him.
Yeah.
That's why it's so good to ask these kind of books. And for those Muslims who are watching, as we end off this series, and as we end off this 6th episode, remember what we've done. We're not here to just criticize Muhammad as from a Christian perspective. What we have done is to use names, dates, places, and events. We have taken historical data, we've brought it together, we have asked the same questions that have been asked of this book, the Bible. This book has been asked about the names, dates, places, and events since the 1800s. All of them have been answers. The documentary hypothesis, the whole problem with redaction criticism, source criticism, historical criticism is actually biblical criticism. So we have done that to the Bible, and that's why we are now applying it to the Quran and applying it to your Prophet Muhammad. We have pretty well destroyed the Quran in the manuscript material that we had earlier. Now we've destroyed Muhammad in this material that we have here. You've got the wrong man, doing the wrong thing, at the wrong place, in the wrong time. Why don't you come back to Jesus Christ? He is the right man for today. He is the right man for every day. He is the right man for you, the right man for me, the right man for everyone. Come on back to that Jesus, because what he said and what he did can save you for eternity. Hatun, it's been great to have you on board.
Thanks
it's been
for
so
having me,
good to unpack this together with you. I want to thank Dan Gibson especially for the great work he is doing. We want to continue to support him. We want to also know that we're going to continue with these videos so that we can unpack them more and more as we learn.
Yeah.
Remember, come on home to Jesus Christ. He is really the only man for all time, in all places, for you and for me. Jane Hatun, here in London, over and out.